So, just like the hit Future song Mask Off, the CDC has also said that vaccinated Americans can take off their masks. So, welcome to the Tonic Accord. And today we're going to start off with kind of talking about some COVID updates, like the CDC's new mask changes, vaccines, and more. So Drew, are you going to be walking around LA without your mask indoors?
Well, not indoors as much as I would want to. Yeah, this is where it's weird because I want to. I'm fully vaccinated. I'm past 2 weeks after my second dose. Like, I'm ready to go. But and the CDC is it's telling people that if you are fully vaccinated, that the vaccines work even against the variants, and that you can start to resume a normal life. However, the confusing thing is where do state governments and local governments lie, right? Like, I think immediately after this, some states were rolling back their mask requirements, but California is not, and in private businesses as well are going to still have to decide for themselves, do they want masks, right? So, whether it's Walmart saying they're going to reassess some of their mask policies, or Trader Joe's and stuff, it just depends. So where I am, what up, RoboMax224? How's it going, bud? So where I am, you know, everyone's still wearing masks indoors. But I do think that this is a big step, and it's a big thing. Like the CDC saying, hey, it's time to actually really change your thinking. And though it does seem like it was kind of like just rushed out there, like I was listening to an NPR daily podcast about this, and they had mentioned that Joe Biden only knew about this change from the CDC like the morning of the same day. Like, he didn't have time to prepare, right? It seemed like the CDC kind of just sprung this on everybody. But maybe that's kind of what you need to really just kind of like let people know, to kind of change your thinking of like, okay, we've been bunkered down and hunkered down for a year. Now the reality is, if you're vaccinated, you don't have to be like that.
Yes, definitely. And yeah, when I first saw it, to be honest, I think what it was like last Wednesday or something, I was just like, interesting, because I feel like it's been such a glacial movement of changes with masks, and then just bam, like just bam, everything's just hitting like that. And I feel like there's two like kind of thought patterns on this. And I actually am a little bit hesitant about them doing this so quick. But I do see what you're saying there. Like, Bill Crystal also was on the Bulwark, was kind of using that point where he's like, this could be a strategy to show people, that if they're hesitant about the vaccine, if they get it, there is an end in sight. And under that way, I mean, it's true, it works. And yeah, like you said, the vaccines are safe. And if you're trying to get people to take the vaccine, I think you should give this positivity, because for months it was kind of like, well, even a year after you get vaccinated, you still might need to mask up. And, it probably turned off a lot of hesitant people. You know what I mean? But this seems to be a little more optimistic. My issue, though, is that, like, CDC Director Walensky was on Meet the Press with Chuck Todd on Sunday, and I just watched a little portion of it. But she was basically like, people are going to have to be responsible and be honest and do what they think is right. And let's be honest, the last year has showed us that that's pretty difficult for a lot of people. And I've
Yeah.
already seen things about, fake COVID vaccine cards. There's like a nurse, I think it was in New Mexico, who got arrested for stealing vaccine cards from the CVS or something like that. And so we're going to see this, I think, just kind of this snowball of people trying to pretend they're vaccinated so they don't have to wear a mask. How do you enforce it? This kind of puts, small businesses, probably especially, at kind of this heightened risk or just heightened chaos of like trying to get people to prove they're vaccinated or not. So like, I agree that I think it's a good direction and it probably gives some good optimism, but I think the rollout was a little shaky. Obviously, time will tell, because there are still, like, I think I saw that, I think it was 25% of Republicans still won't get vaccinated, which is okay for herd immunity, but we do need more people to get vaccinated. So yeah, that's just kind of where I
Yeah, but
stand.
obviously the thing with those Republicans is they're making it a show of it's some,
Right.
it's political grandstanding somehow for not getting vaccinated, which is ridiculous. But no, that's but I mean, it's interesting, the response, because like I have heard criticism, like I have heard that criticism that it was too much too soon or whatever. You can't trust people, but it's interesting that like the White House has seemed to adopt it really quick. Like the White House
Right.
is no longer has a mask policy, because everyone in the White House is vaccinated. Um, And Joe Biden's having meetings with vaccinated leaders without masks in closed doors, right? And so and his press secretary is without mask, and her staff. So they're really, they're really showing that they're like, yeah, yeah, we're taking this CDC thing seriously, and the CDC is saying that I see like that it's just based off the science that within the last 2 weeks, even from their previous update on mask rules, they found more science to suggest that vaccines are even more effective than we had thought against the variants. I think that's a big thing. Oh, here we go already coming in with "fuck is real." We're not on
Right.
that topic yet. Also, you spelled Israel wrong, but we'll get there. Right, but right now we're on masks, and the reality is the vaccines are proven to be better on the variants than we had expected, and so I think that's what pushed things along, was like we don't have to worry about some of the things we were worried about a month ago, as well as the Pfizer going to be good against the Brazilian one or whatever. Now we know that it is. We know that these vaccines are very effective, to the point where even kids can now get them in a lot of states. Um, and so, yes, I'm hoping that there's enough people that are responsible that those anti-vax communities won't matter enough in the grand scheme. And I also heard those news stories about like some guy to CVS selling fake COVID vaccine cards. I have to imagine though that those are rare, right? Like that became a story because that's crazy. That guy probably
Right.
immediately lost his job. Like I have to imagine, like there's no way that that's happening at a large scale. I don't think so. And hopefully, just like my state, surprisingly, like California only has like 11% of people had some vaccine hesitancy. So if you get 9 out of 10, I mean, you're golden. And that's California, that I know more liberal, but still has a lot of people that I think I figured would have been higher than that. So I'm hoping that really soon, even like private companies, like going to the grocery store, will lift the mask mandates, and we can really start to get back to normal.
Yes, no, no, absolutely, and like, yeah, I do agree that that's probably a rare case of the person's. I don't think we're going to see every pharmacist stealing vaccine cards, no doubt. Though, again, like it goes back to my main issue with this, though, and I'm not going to stay on it too long, but it's just that there is no like. Basically, what I think they should have done is at least have criteria like you need to present X, Y, and Z or something, because there are going to be people who are just going to say, "Hey, I'm vaccinated." I'm not talking about in California, because you're right. Here in California, it's probably a different case, but I could see in certain states, I could see that being a little bit different. Turning it just a little bit while we're on COVID, though, what do you think about Biden announcing that they're going to sell over 20 million, or not sell, but give over 20 million doses of Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson and Johnson to the world? To me, that's great news, because I was reading something in The Economist that Canada ordered 13 vaccinations per person, and the UK 9, because they were so afraid of which vaccine's going to work, which is not, and so states like us, the UK, Canada, we've basically stockpiled vaccines. So, good thing. How do you think that's going to roll out?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. I mean, credit to both administrations. Both Biden and Trump's administration were really good at buying, like buying, basically reserving vaccines early from these companies. Um, and that is why the United States is way ahead on the vaccinations, as well as an effective rollout and making these mass vaccination sites, and making it free and everything, right? So now that we are like so ahead, I think, of the world, why not, right? Why not use millions and millions of vaccines to give out to other people? Again, I mean, one, morally, I do think it's the right thing to do. But then two, even if you want to think selfishly, it's selfishly a good thing to do, because the more you vaccinate the world, the less people come to your country with COVID, right? Like it's a feedback loop of the healthier everyone else is, the healthier the people, coming to our country are. So I think it's absolutely a good thing, and I mean, I don't really see how anyone could think it's a bad thing. The only argument that it would be bad is that they haven't vaccinated enough Americans first. But the reality is we have, and if you haven't gotten a vaccine in America at this point, it's because it's your choice, like it's because you just don't want to.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. No, it's good to see, and I honestly think it's good for the economy of the world as well.
Yeah,
Like more people vaccinated means more people going back to work,
yeah,
less civil unrest, all of that. So yeah, it's going to be cool. I'm glad Biden did that, because for a while he was pushing for getting rid of intellectual property rights, which I mean, that's a whole other conversation, but I think it's too late. That would take like probably close to a year to actually get that implemented. So
Right.
I'm glad they went this route. So yeah. What else is on your mind this week? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if you have anything else on masks and COVID, but
Not massive COVID. Yeah. Before we dive into the really tough stuff,
yeah.
where we're gonna start seeing some swear words thrown around. But before that, maybe like the UFOs, man. UFOs are
Mhm.
getting big hot spot in news. And to the point where it's like mainstream, like no longer just like History Channel stuff, where you have the Pentagon, and the U.S. Defense Department both admitting that they exist, that unidentified aerial phenomenon (UAPs) exist, and we don't know what they're doing, and and important countries sort of no, we're getting to it. We're getting to it, man. We're getting to different topics. We have a lot to cover. Um, anyway, so yeah, what's cool is like it's a topic that you and I have both been interested in for a while, just for fun and just because we've it's a fascinating topic, but it was always on the fringe, and now we're seeing it become a mainstream topic covered by the New York Times, the New Yorker, and now 60 Minutes. And
Yeah.
I think it's pretty fascinating. Like, what do you think, man? Like, what? Do you ever think this day would even come?
No. Like I listen to a lot of Joe Rogan, and he brings on a lot of ex-military, ex-Air Force pilots, and they all joke about how they basically were silent for decades about this stuff because they'd be laughed at. They would be considered a complete loon. And I honestly never saw it either. I mean, I've had some, I think I've seen a UFO in my life or two. And if I told just your average, like, working Joe, he'd probably make fun of me. And so, like, I think you and I were talking about this yesterday. It seems like that Overton window of what is possible to talk about
Mm-hmm.
has kind of opened up. But now there's an alarming thing about this too, which is obviously all kind of anecdotal and speculative, but it seems like these encounters are getting like closer to people and closer to our technology. And I think they're like this is again a theory, so don't condemn me for this, but it seems like the Pentagon's maybe talking about it because it's harder to cover these things up in a way because like we've had reports of these things getting close to our nuclear facilities, close to military installments, Guantanamo. They used to be kind of out in the middle of Nebraska or something. But it seems like they're getting closer and closer to kind of our infrastructure, our military, our technology, and that's either by chance or kind of alarming, depending where you go with that. But yeah, it's really fascinating, man. And I think like RoboMax here says, aliens existing is inevitable. I agree, but there's that idea of would we ever actually be coming into contact with them, and maybe we are.
Well, certainly the credibility of this kind of phenomenon is changing because of like right here, 60 Minutes talking to Navy
Right.
pilots that not only saw in like as a group, like four of them saw a UAP up close and do incredible movements that they can't explain, but then went on years later in the late 2000s, early 2010s to be a part of a whole Pentagon program looking at UAPs. If the That sounds pretty serious to me. Like that doesn't sound like, the crazy farmer with the shotgun with his cow getting abducted. Like these are like Navy pilots that were called on to the Pentagon to give data and information and look into the phenomenon. Like obviously now the government's taking it seriously. Um and the media, I think, is taking it seriously. What's interesting is I watched an interview with a reporter from the New Yorker who did a lot of coverage on this phenomenon and the media around it. And he talked about how, like that Overton window conversation, how it actually wasn't taboo or fringe to talk about it but in from like the 40s to the 70s. So post World War II, 50s, 60s, it was a lot of like mainstream coverage, like front page news sometimes, and people would ask government officials about UFOs and stuff like that. And that's where we get all the famous, oh, it's a weather balloon and it's the Russians, right? And I think something happened in the 70s where maybe the government plan was to just completely deny, or I don't know if it was like a planned thing or just maybe a cultural shift where too many of those Hollywood B movies were made that people were uninterested in UFOs. But like at one point, it was not taboo to talk about it, and then from 1970 until about 2015, it was taboo again, and it was only late night channels on the late night shows at 1 a.m. on the History Channel. But now it's back to being like it's 60 Minutes, New York Times, like respected journalists journalists are investigating this, and military people are talking about it, and Defense Department is taking it seriously. It's like, whoa, damn.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, I mean, if you just see some of these videos, the movement of these things, just the way they seem to defy physics in a lot of these circumstances. I mean, that's always been kind of what brings me back to it is, some of them, there could be drones involved in some of this.
Sure,
I
of
mean, I'm sure
course.
that not all of them are UFOs or UAPs. But obviously the Russians and the Chinese are not that ahead of us on something so fundamental as like gravity and physics and like jet propulsion and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So, and it just, it's really fascinating. I am curious, just thinking ahead here. I'm curious if there's a reason why the government tried so hard to cover it up. I like to kind of put I usually don't like conspiracies, but when I get into aliens, I love to put on my tinfoil hat, and I do wonder if, because you're right, there was this kind of like, I think Roswell in a way was kind of the big like changing point where the military reported right after that crash that it was a UFO or some unknown object, right, and then they changed it to a weather balloon. And it seems like since then there's been this kind of escalation of that. I would think it's maybe the Cold War, that maybe had us so focused on like securing intelligence that maybe we didn't want to keep anything open. But yeah, I think it's really interesting to see, and the fact that it's coming from Navy pilots, Air Force pilots, like I just happen to think these type of people are pretty credible. It takes a lot of long work and a lot of education, and you kind of have to be pretty straight edge to do those type of jobs. It's not like you have, yeah, like a cattle farmer in Nebraska or something. So it's going to be interesting to see. Like, I also wonder if Trump being president maybe brought some of this to light, just because maybe there was a fear that he was just going to spill the beans. Because let's be honest, that guy talks about everything. So maybe it was better to beat him to the story. I don't know.
It is weird though. It's got this weirdly I mean, makes sense because it's not. I mean, I don't know why it wouldn't be, but it is weirdly bipartisan. Like you have Harry Reid, a Democrat, who's super fascinated and launched programs into looking into getting reports, and then you also have like Senator Marco Rubio, who's
Right.
fascinated with this, and you know and they both talk about how in the halls of Congress, a lot of people used to snicker and giggle about the topic, but they were the ones that were like, "No, this is serious." And like, think about it; it is serious. If you really don't know what the hell's going on, just drop the aliens. Even without the aliens perspective, if you have someone has the capabilities to basically juke and outclass your best fighter jets by incredible measures. You want to know what the hell that is? Like, what the hell is that? And then, especially if it is aliens, we should probably figure out what's going on. So, yeah, I mean, the zeitgeist feels like it's changing around the topic, which is pretty cool.
Hmm. And yeah, I just it'll be funny to see what happens. Well, not really funny. It could be funny. It could be terrifying. Who knows? But I'm curious. I think there's something with our oceans too, because a lot of these seem to be coming out of the ocean. So that brings up some other questions. Ocean's kind of the unknown frontier on Earth. We really couldn't map out the oceans.
I
Brings
hear,
up some questions, man.
I hear a lot about like lights going in and out of the ocean between LA and Catalina. Like
Hmm.
people see him go like they'll like it's just what I hear, just what I hear. Who knows, man? Who knows? But it's certainly like dope that the conversations around it is changing. And I also saw a funny comment on Reddit. It was someone said this is vindication for all the like weird drunk uncles that were like, you
Great.
ever
Just
think
what we
about
need.
yeah, you ever think about you have aliens, man? Like now they're all like, I'm telling you, the government's admitting it now. Like how many dudes out in the desert in a trailer with the little bent satellite thing have now gotten completely validated by this?
Oh boy. Just what we need is validation for the crazy uncle at Thanksgiving. But
All right.
yeah.